We need to talk to you after church.
Okay, all right. Oh yeah, I've got more stuff. So. All right. So we're starting back again with the topic, no graven images. If you would now look at Psalm 115. Psalm 115. Psalm 115. And the psalmist says, "Not to us, O Lord, not to us, but to your name give glory, and for your mercy, and for your truth's sake. Wherefore should the heathen say, where now is their God?" Think about that for a moment in the world that we live in. How many people around in your society is asking you, where is your God? When you get a diagnosis from a doctor, where's your God? When you get bad news about one of your children, where is your God? When you can't make ends meet at home, when you're struggling through difficult situations and the pressures of work come down on you, or what about loneliness? I bet you there's a lot of people, even in amongst us, meaning the churches of Christ, are lonely. Even though they have family, a church family to go to, they go home to an empty house. Loneliness. Where's your God? Is it more difficult in those times to raise your voice in prayer and praise to Him? I know of a lot of people, and I can, even for myself, I'm 56 years old, and there's difficulty that comes in life, and y'all are young. Y'all like, man, this is life. When you go away to college, or you move out of your parents' home, and you're tempted to do a lot of things, and your friends are going to say, and your professors are going to say, where is your God? You see, life in seeing it from a physical sense and from the physical things that we encounter every day, it's tempting to say, there's no God. It's tempting. But you see, God knew the weaknesses we would have and the temptations that we would have to put our trust in the things we see and not in the things we know through the unseen. Number 3, but our God is in heavens. He has done whatsoever He has pleased. Their idols are silver and gold and the work of man's hands, and they have mouths, but they cannot speak. They have eyes, but they cannot see. They have ears, but they cannot hear. They have noses, but they can't smell. They have hands, but they handle not. They have feet, but they walk not. They neither speak through their own throats. They that make them are like unto them. That's an interesting verse. He says these physical attributes and these physical things, they that make them, basically those that have trust in these items, those who have made them and put their trust in them, they're just like them. They have ears, they don't hear. They have eyes, but they don't see. They have feet that don't walk, hands that do nothing. They that make them are like them, so is everyone that trusts in them. O Israel, trust you in the Lord. He is their help and their shield. O house of Aaron, trust in the Lord. He is their help and He is their shield. You that fear the Lord, trust in the Lord, and He is their help and shield. The Lord has been mindful of us. He will bless us. He will bless the house of Israel, and He will bless the house of Aaron. He will bless them that fear the Lord, both great and small. And the Lord shall increase you more and your children. And you are blessed, all of the Lord, which has made heaven and earth. The heaven, even the heavens, are the Lord's, but the earth has He given to the children of men. The dead praise not the Lord, neither any that go down into silence. But we will bless the Lord from this time forth forevermore. Praise the Lord. You see what He compares those that put their trust in the physical things of this world. He compares them to dead men. He says they're dead just like their idols are dead. But it's those that are truly alive are the ones that understand and can see who God really is. Have you ever wondered what the test is? What's the test? Why did God even create a physical world? Why is there even physical things that we can see and drawn by our weaknesses may fall into temptation by looking at it? Why are these things present? This is just my summation, just my thoughts, okay? You see, there was a time before man was created that there was beings in heaven. And these beings rebelled against God. The writer who would then go in to tell us about the leaders of the church, he would say, don't be a novice. Don't have a person who's a novice become an elder of your church, because he may fall into the same condemnation as the devil, describing pride that comes with a lack of knowledge. So that gives us a hint as to what befalled Satan. These beings were before the presence of God in heaven itself, seeing all glory of God manifested in a visual way, a way that they could understand and see, and yet they rebelled against God. And God created man into a physical world, separated him from the presence of seeing Him in the fullness of His glory. And He set man as the test, knowing that man would not succumb. You know, when a person obeys the gospel, what happens in the presence of God? They rejoice. Why do they rejoice? Yeah, a sinner returns to God, but why? Why are angels rejoicing over that? Because that's a person who's let go of the physical things of this world, who has been tempted by the physical presence of all that he can see, to follow a God that he cannot see. And when all of life is over and we stand before the judgment seat of God, all of those who have followed by faith will see him as he is. And in seeing him as he is, judgment will be passed. And there will be that righteous judgment to say to all of the rebellious ones, from the spiritual kingdom down to this earthly world, you had proof. You had a God that you could not see, but he was present in every aspect of your life, and you never turned to him. Man has a way of being redeemed from that viewpoint. Angels have no redemption because they had seen what God was or is. They were in the presence of that God. And they saw him and still rejected him. Man has yet to see God, but can accept him and find redemption and be saved. No graven images before me. Don't bow yourself down to those graven images. Don't be like those individuals. There was one in the Bible. Her name was Rachel. You remember Rachel? Remember Rachel, the wife of Jacob? Remember how Jacob worked? You remember when she left her father's house, what did she take with her? You recall? She took these little statues. Could have put them in her pocket and left. Now, before she left, she told Jacob, "Your God is my God. Your God will I follow, and I'm going to go with you." And so she left her home, and she left all of her dad's possessions, left all of that behind, and she says, "I'm going to follow the God of Jacob." And yet, as she walked out of that home, what did she take with her? Something she came to rely upon all of her life. You know, sometimes we can have just enough God to make us miserable. We can follow him just about as far as we want to go, but in case our God is not big enough to handle our problems, we are going to carry our idols in our pockets. And we're going to rely upon them when the times get tough. That's what we're going to turn to. Enough God for the good times, but just in case he's not there, I'm going to hold on to this physical world. Rachel is an interesting example of that. Another example from the Old Testament. You remember the king Ahab. Who is Ahab's wife? Jezebel. Remember what was happening in Ahab and Jezebel's life? You remember? What had been ushered in under them? Idolatry. In fact, they even have a priesthood of idolatrous men. And you get to the book of Kings, I believe it's 1 Kings 8, 1st or 2nd Kings 18. And you get to the story of them bowing down to this God. And they get to a contest on Mount Carmel. Remember the contest? The prophet Elijah comes out and he challenges. Now, standing out there among all these other priests that were around the king's table. Now remember, these are the scientists. These are the highfalutin, top-notch people of their community, and they're sitting around hobnobbing with all the famous actresses of their day, of the scientists of their day, and they're sitting around the king's banquet table, and in comes Elijah with the warning, and the challenge. And Elijah says, if Yahweh is God, follow Him, but if Baal, then follow him. What did the people say after Elijah gave that challenge? Isn't it interesting that the people said nothing? Isn't it interesting? Here was the Israelites, the people of God, that was supposed to be following God as being the only God, no graven images before them, and all the way down the other 10 commandments, and sacrificing the animals and all of that type of stuff in their temple worship. And when Elijah says the most profound thing in their presence, what do? They remain silent. What's happening in our world today? You've got the banquet tables being spread all across social media. This is what you need. This is part of the in crowd that you need to be a part of. And you hear people say there is no God. Worship these idols that we have set up. Worship this false god. Worship this actor. Worship this actress. Worship atheism. Worship all-inclusiveness. And all of that type of stuff. And then, so in walks somebody, an Elijah of today, and says, if this be your God, if this be God, worship Him. But if it be Yahweh, His God, worship Him. We rarely see challenges being laid out anymore in that type. And people are silent. Christians are silent in these arenas. And so Elijah goes out and he issues the challenge, and then we know they accept. And so they go out and they start, Elijah tells them all what to do, build this big altar, put all of this wood on the altar. And they began chanting and praying, and Elijah sitting over there at the side and said, holler louder, your God's not listening. So they start beating themselves and start cutting themselves, and they holler, and nothing happens. And Elisha steps up, you could just see him go. And he says a little prayer. The God that they were serving, Baal, was the god of water. He was the god of water. And so Elijah makes this one prayer. And the heavens open. They have all the fire and everything's on fire, The fire comes down and laps up all the water. Burns up all the people that were standing around. This is your God. Worship Him. And so it's interesting to see that at every turn, and you could even go through, the other story is Moses in leading the children out of Egypt, how God matched God for God and showed them that He was over every single one of the Egyptian gods in the plagues. Did you know that every plague that was brought upon them was a statement against their idols? Every single one was an idol that they would worship. You get to the New Testament, though, in that last 2 minutes. You get to the New Testament in the book of 1 Thessalonians. And you see how Paul is praising the Christians. And he says to them, he says, I'm so thankful and so happy that you have exhibited yourselves the way that you exhibited yourselves before others, in that you have left idolatry to serve, what's the word? Living God. He tells them, you have left this and now you're serving the living God, because they recognized how to walk by faith and not by sight. Interesting point, and I'll close with this. Have you ever wondered why they were so enamored with idolatry in the first century? Did you know that they didn't have any health insurance to go to the store? They didn't have a State Farm agent or an Alpha agent, or didn't have an agent like that. They had idolatry. And if they were to give so much money to an idol, then they could expect themselves to be healed by that idol. And if they weren't healed, then they didn't give enough money or they didn't believe enough. And so on every corner of the Roman Empire, at every crossroads, there were these little cutout areas in the rock. We see them in our walls today, the little inlets. And those little inlets had idols that would sit in there. And every time you came to a crosswalk, you would give money or pay homage to an idol so that he could see you on the journey to the next one. And then you had to pay again. Their insurance was their idolatry. And so when Christians gave up idolatry to follow a God they could not see, they were counted as fools, giving up their health insurance to serve something they cannot see, yet they come to trust in. It's amazing that these Christians of the first century turned their backs on the things that they could see to serve a God they could not see. But the question is, could they see Him? Yes, they could. Every time they looked into the Savior's face hanging on the cross, when they remembered the sacrifice that He made, they could know Him. They knew exactly who He was. We today, 2,000 years later, we see God. Not through a physical eye, but through the spiritual message, His Word, that He left for us today. He didn't leave us an idol. He left us His Word. And that Word is so powerful, dynamite to the soul. And faith, when it hears the Word and believes it, becomes a follower of that Word. And then every day following, they see God in the spiritual sense. One day we're going to leave this earth. One day we're going to go to heaven before the throne of God. And we get to see Him face to face. We get to see loved ones that have passed on. We get to walk before the throne of God hand in hand, rejoicing, because at that moment our faith becomes sight. That's where I want to go. So I hope this lesson about no graven images hasn't been focused on the negative side of the command, but on the positive side. Why we don't have graven images, but we have a living God that's greater than anything we can see, hope, or imagine. So I hope the lesson's been beneficial to you tonight. Thank you for your time.